Greetings viewers, JLB here. On this final installment of the 50s season for Animated Television History Tour, we are going to be taking a look at a show that was very influential at the time, and one that some people may remember or some may not have heard of. It's known by many names, but I'm only calling it one name today. And that show is none other than The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. The show, it was well known for not just its quality writing and its wry humor, but also because it mixed in puns, cultural and topical satire, self-referential humor, and that basically made it a show that was appealing to both children and adults back in the 50s, and even today. But rather than talk about what it accomplished, let's talk about how it all got started. The idea for The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle came from Jay Ward and Alex Alexander, who previously collaborated on another show that we talked about on this show, Crusader Rabbit. It was based on the original property, The Frostbite Falls Review. But this original show never really got off the ground beyond the proposal stage. It featured a group of forest animals running a television station, and they included Rocket J. Squirrel, who would later become known as Rocky, Oski Bear, Canadian Moose, who would later be renamed Bullwinkle, Sylvester Fox, Blackstone Crow, and Floral Fauna. Now that show was, in that form, was created by Alex Anderson, Now, some of you are probably thinking where Bullwinkle got his name. Well, Bullwinkle's name came from the name of a car dealership in Berkeley, California called Bullwinkle Automobiles. All that Mr. Anderson did was just change the two letters around, and Bullwinkle gets his name. Now, Mr. Ward, he wanted to produce the show in Los Angeles. However, Mr. Anderson lived in the San Francisco Bay Area and he didn't want to relocate. So, Mr. Ward hired Bill Scott as the head writer and co-producer at J. Ward Productions. And there, he wrote the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. Ward ended up He ultimately was joined by writers Chris Hayward and Alan Burns, the latter of which eventually became head writer for MTM Enterprises. The series began with a pilot called Rocky the Flying Squirrel. Now, production of the show began in February of 1958 with the hiring of voice actors June Foray, Paul Frees, Bill Scott, and William Conrad. 8 months later, General Mills, the company that makes Honey Nut Cheerios and all those famous breakfast cereals, well, they signed a deal to sponsor the show, under one condition. The show be aired in the late afternoon, when it could be targeted towards the children. Subsequently, Ward hired the rest of the production staff, including writers and designers. However, no animators were hired. So ad executives at Dancer, Fitzgerald, and Sample, the ad agency for General Mills, set up their own animation studio in Mexico called Gamma Productions, SADCV, originally known as Valmar Animation. Now, this outsourcing of animation for the series was considered financially attractive by primary sponsor General Mills, but it caused endless production problems. And probably too many for me to list right now, so let's move on. The show broadcast for the first time on ABC on November 19th, 1959. Under the original title Rocky and His Friends. It aired twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons following American Bandstand at 5:30, where it was the highest rated daytime program. That's right, this show, it was way up there. Depending on how good it was, because kids loved it, parents loved it, anyone who was watching TV on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, they really enjoyed the show. The show ultimately moved to NBC starting on September 24th, 1961, broadcasting color, and it first appeared on Sundays at 7 p.m., just before Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, which we know as The Wonderful World of Disney. However, Bullwinkle's ratings suffered as a result of airing opposite the perennial favorite show, Lassie. Guess that a dog can easily beat a moose in both real life and in television ratings. Now, there was a potential move to CBS that caused NBC to reschedule the show to late Sunday afternoons, around 5:30, and early Saturday afternoons in its final season. Ultimately, the show was canceled in 1964. Nobody was interested in airing reruns. Not ABC, not NBC, not CBS, nobody. However, there were reruns that aired on ABC's Sunday morning schedule at 11 a.m. until 1973, which was the time when the show went into syndication. Now, of course, there was a abbreviated 15-minute version of the show that ran syndication in the 60s under the title The Rocky Show. This version was sometimes shown in conjunction with The King and Audie, which was a 15-minute version of Total Television's King Leonardo and Short Subjects, which we will get to later on the show, I hope. And that was actually similar to Rocky and Bullwinkle because it too was sponsored by General Mills and animated by Gamma Productions. NBC would then later air Bullwinkle show reruns at 12:30 p.m. on Saturday afternoons during the 1981-1982 television season. Now on cable, the series had extended runs on Nickelodeon between 1990 and 1994. The famous CN that we used to know from 1993 to 2002, and on Boomerang in the early 2000s. And then since the late 2000s, the program exchange has been typically licensed. They only license the series for short-term runs. But nationally, the series has seen limited airings on WGN America in 2009, VH1 Classic in 2012, and on the Boomerang channel in 2013. Now, each episode was composed of 2 Rocky and Bullwinkle shorts that emulated radio and film serials, which made you tune in to the next episode. And funny fact, for all you folks who are fans of anime out there, like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Attack on Titan, the plots of these shorts all combined into story arcs. That's right. Before Naruto started doing story arcs, Rocky and Bullwinkle were doing it. And those story arcs span numerous episodes, with the longest and the first being the Jet Fuel Formula story, which consisted of about 20 episodes. And they range from different things like seeking the missing ingredient for a rocket fuel formula, tracking the monstrous whale Moby Dick, which is a parody of Moby Dick, if you guys are into literature, to an attempt to prevent mechanical metal-punching moon mice from devouring the nation's television antennas. Yeah, I think you can tell why Rocky and Bullwinkle were pretty influential for their time. But Rocky and Bullwinkle didn't share television waves to themselves. They had some friends who joined them, like, say, Dudley Do-Right of the Mountains, which were a bunch of shorts that were parodies of the 20th century melodrama and silent film series of the Northern genre, which featured a Canadian Mountie by the name of Dudley Do-Right. There's Peabody's Improbable History, which featured the genius talking dog Mr. Peabody, and you might hear a little bit about Mr. Peabody later on in animation cinema, but we'll get to that when we get to that. There was also Fractured Fairy Tales, which presented familiar fairy tales and children's stories, but with altered storylines and modernized for humorous, satirical effect. Aesop and Son, which was similar to Fractured Fairy Tales. Bullwinkle's Corner, which featured Bullwinkle attempting to introduce culture into the proceedings by reciting and acting out poems and nursery rhymes. Mr. Know-It-All, which featured Bullwinkle again, posing as an authority on any topic. The Bullwinkle and Rocky Fan Club, which was a series of abortive attempts of Rocky and Bullwinkle to conduct club business, though it only consisted of them, the series baddies Boris and Natasha, and Captain Peter Wrongway Peachfuzz. Then there was the world of Commander McBragg, which featured on revisionist history as Captain McBragg, the lead, would have imagined it. Fun fact, those shorts were actually prepared for the Tennessee Tuxedo and His Tail show, and later shown on the Underdog show, both of which we'll be talking about later on this show. But in all seriousness, is Rocky and Bullwinkle really worth your time to see? Resounding yes! This show is definitely influential and deserves to be remembered for everything that it did. If you're an animation fan, you owe it to yourself to watch Rocky and Bullwinkle in action. They had some films, all the characters, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Natasha and Boris, and Dudley Do-Right, and Mr. Peabody. Most of them are live action, but I'm only going to be talking about Mr. Peabody, or Peabody and Sherman, if you will, later on Animation Cinema. In the meantime, go watch some episodes of Rocky and Bullwinkle. For this full series of 1950s anime television shows that I've been talking about, thank you so much for joining me. We made it through one decade, we got a bunch more to go through. So until then, see you in the 60s, and remember to always remember, enjoy the adventures of Moose and Squirrel.